A 68-year-old woman opened her barn to 79 Hells Angels during a deadly tornado. She served them coffee, wrapped them in blankets, and kept them safe through the longest night of their lives. 5 days later, 300 bikers returned. But it wasn't just to say thank you. It was to repay a debt that went back 40 years. The sky turned green at 4:47 p.m. Eleanor Briggs had lived in Hollister, Missouri for 68 years, and she knew what that color meant. She had seen it twice before in her lifetime, once when she was 12, when a tornado took her family's barn and 3 of their horses, and once when she was 41, when another twister killed her husband of 19 years. She knew that green sky meant death was coming. The emergency sirens had been wailing for 20 minutes. The radio announcer's voice was shaking as he warned residents to seek immediate shelter. This wasn't a typical spring storm. This was an EF4 tornado, packing winds of over 170 miles per hour, carving a path of destruction directly toward Taney County. Eleanor stood on her porch, watching the horizon. Her farmhouse was old, built by her grandfather in 1952. The paint was peeling, the roof leaked in 3 places, and the electricity had been spotty for months. She couldn't afford repairs. After her husband Thomas died, the medical bills had taken everything, but she had the cellar beneath her barn. Reinforced concrete, built by her father after the tornado of 1967, it had saved her life once. It would save her life again. She was about to head inside when she saw them. Headlights, dozens of them, coming down Route 76, fighting against winds that were already pushing 50 miles per hour. Motorcycles. Eleanor squinted through the darkening sky. The riders were struggling, their bikes wobbling as gusts threatened to throw them off the road. They were pulling over one by one, seeking any shelter they could find. But there was nothing out here, just empty fields and Eleanor's old farm. The first bike skidded to a stop at the end of her driveway. The rider was massive, dressed in black leather, his face hidden behind a helmet and bandana. Behind him, more bikes were arriving. 10, 20, 30. Eleanor's heart pounded. She knew who these men were. The patches on their vests were unmistakable. Hells Angels, the most notorious motorcycle club in America. Every instinct told her to run inside, lock the doors, hide in the cellar and pray they moved on. But then she saw something that changed everything. One of the riders was down. His bike had slipped on the wet road, and 2 others were helping him up. He was limping badly, clutching his arm, and behind them the sky was getting darker, greener, angrier. These men were going to die out here. Eleanor made a decision that would change her life forever. She grabbed her flashlight and ran toward them, waving her arms. "Hey, hey, over here!" The lead rider turned. Even through the rain, she could see his confusion. An old woman in a floral dress, running toward a group of Hells Angels in the middle of a tornado warning. "There's a cellar!" Eleanor shouted over the wind. "Under my barn! It's reinforced! You'll be safe there!" The rider lifted his visor. He was in his 50s, with a grey beard and eyes that had seen too much. For a long moment he just stared at her. "Ma'am, do you know who we are?" "I know exactly who you are, and I know that tornado doesn't care about your patches. Now get your boys off those bikes and follow me before we all die." Something shifted in the man's eyes. Respect, maybe, or surprise. He turned and bellowed orders to his brothers, his voice somehow cutting through the howling wind. "Everyone off! Leave the bikes! Follow the lady! Now!" The next few minutes were chaos. 79 men abandoned their motorcycles and ran toward Eleanor's barn. She led them around the back to the heavy steel doors that covered the cellar entrance. Rust made them difficult to open, but 3 bikers grabbed the handles and pulled together. The doors swung wide, revealing concrete stairs descending into darkness. "Go! Go! Go!" One by one, the Hells Angels poured into the cellar. Eleanor counted them as they passed. 40, 50, 60. The injured man was carried down by 2 of his brothers. 70, 75. The wind was screaming now. Eleanor could barely stand. "That's everyone!" The lead rider shouted, "Get inside!" Eleanor took one last look at the sky. The tornado was visible now, a massive black funnel descending from the clouds, maybe 2 miles away. It was the biggest she had ever seen. She ran down the stairs. The lead rider followed, pulling the heavy doors shut behind them. Then there was only darkness, the sound of terrified breathing, and the growing roar of the monster above. The cellar was never meant to hold 79 people. It was a space perhaps 40 feet by 30, with concrete walls and a low ceiling. Emergency supplies lined the shelves, canned food, water jugs, flashlights, blankets. Eleanor had maintained it religiously since Thomas died, even when she couldn't afford to fix the rest of the house. Now it was packed with leather-clad bikers, pressed shoulder to shoulder, their faces illuminated by the weak beam of Eleanor's flashlight. "Does anyone have injuries?" Eleanor asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Razor's got a broken arm," someone called out. "Maybe some cracked ribs." "Bring him here. I have a first aid kit." The injured man was helped to the front of the crowd. He was young, maybe 30, with tattoos covering his neck and a face twisted in pain. Eleanor knelt beside him, clicking on a battery-powered lantern. "What's your name, sweetheart?" The man blinked, clearly not expecting to be called sweetheart by anyone, let alone a grandmother in the middle of a tornado. "Razor, Mom." "Well, Razor, I'm going to need to look at that arm. It's going to hurt, but I'll be gentle, okay?" He nodded, and Eleanor went to work. Her hands were steady. She had been a nurse for 30 years before retiring. She examined the arm, confirmed the break, and fashioned a splint from materials in her kit. Above them, the tornado hit. The sound was unlike anything Eleanor had ever heard. Not just wind, but a physical force, a pressure that made their ears pop and their chests tighten. The cellar doors rattled violently. Dust fell from the ceiling. Someone started praying in Spanish. Eleanor finished the splint and stood up. "Everyone listen to me." Her voice cut through the panic. "This cellar has survived 2 tornadoes. It will survive this one, but I need everyone to stay calm, stay low, and stay together. We're going to be fine." The lead rider pushed through the crowd to stand beside her. In the lantern light, Eleanor could read his patches. "President, Hells Angels, Missouri. I'm Jack," he said quietly. "Jack Sullivan. Most people call me Iron. Eleanor Briggs. Most people call me Ellie." "Ellie." Jack nodded slowly. "Thank you for what you're doing. You didn't have to let us in." "Of course I did. What kind of person would I be if I left you out there to die?" Jack studied her face for a long moment. "Most people would have locked their doors and pretended they didn't see us. We're not exactly popular. Most people are fools." Eleanor turned to address the crowd again. "Now, I've got coffee and thermoses and blankets on the shelves. It's going to be a long night, boys. Might as well get comfortable." For the next 4 hours, Eleanor Briggs did something remarkable. She transformed a concrete bunker full of terrified bikers into something almost like a home. She distributed blankets, poured coffee, handed out granola bars from her emergency supplies. She checked on Razor every 30 minutes, making sure his splint was secure and his pain was manageable. And she told stories. "My husband Thomas built this cellar in 1967, she said, sitting on an overturned crate while the tornado raged above. "Right after the big tornado that took my family's barn. He said if he was going to marry me, he was going to make sure I always had somewhere safe to go." "He sounds like a good man," Jack said. "The best." "We had 41 years together before cancer took him." Eleanor smiled sadly. "He would have loved this. A cellar full of Hell's Angels. He always said I had a talent for collecting strays." Laughter rippled through the crowd. The tension was easing. Men who had been rigid with fear were now leaning against each other, sharing stories of their own. "Where were you headed?" Eleanor asked. "Before the storm." "Charity run," Jack replied. "Annual ride from St. Louis to Branson. We raise money for veterans organizations, homeless shelters, kids with cancer." He shrugged at her surprised expression. "We are not what people think we are." "I never thought you were." Jack's eyes narrowed slightly. "You said you knew exactly who we were, back on the road." Most people see the patches and assume the worst. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a worn photograph. My son Michael joined a motorcycle club when he was 22. I didn't understand it at first. Worried myself sick. But then I met his brothers. Saw how they looked out for each other. How they became family. She handed Jack the photograph. It showed a young man in leather, standing proudly beside a motorcycle. On his vest was a patch Jack recognized immediately. Your son was a Hell's Angel? For 12 years, until he died overseas. Army, 2 tours in Iraq. Eleanor's voice was steady, but her eyes glistened. His brothers came to his funeral, rode from 6 different states, stood guard at his grave for 3 days. Jack stared at the photograph, then back at Eleanor. What was his road name? Ghost. They called him Ghost because he could move so quiet. Something changed in Jack's face. He turned and called out to the crowd. Anyone here remember a brother named Ghost, Michael Briggs, Missouri chapter early 2000s? Murmurs spread through the cellar. Then a voice from the back. I knew Ghost. Rode with him for 2 years before he enlisted. An older biker pushed forward. He was in his 60s, with a white beard and weathered face. He looked at Eleanor with something like wonder. Your Ghost's mum? The one who used to send care packages to the whole chapter? Cookies and scarves and handwritten letters? Eleanor nodded, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. I'll be damned. The old biker pulled her into a hug. Brothers, this is Ghost's mum. She used to take care of us like we were her own kids. The cellar erupted. Men who had been strangers moments ago were now embracing Eleanor, thanking her, sharing memories of her son. And above them, unnoticed now, the tornado slowly moved away. Dawn came grey and quiet. Jack was the first to climb the cellar stairs and push open the heavy doors. What he saw made his stomach drop. Eleanor's farmhouse was destroyed. The tornado had passed directly over the property. The house was nothing but splinters and scattered debris. The porch where Eleanor had stood just hours ago was completely gone. Her truck had been thrown into the field, wrapped around a tree. But the barn still stood, damaged, missing half its roof, but standing. And beneath it, the cellar had held. Ellie! Jack turned to help her up the stairs. Maybe you should... But Eleanor was already climbing. She emerged into the morning light and stopped, staring at the ruins of her home. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she let out a breath. Well, I never liked that kitchen anyway. Jack stared at her in disbelief. Then he started laughing. And once he started, he couldn't stop. Soon the whole group was laughing, the release of tension after hours of terror. You're something else, Ellie, Jack said when he could breathe again. You just lost everything and you're making jokes. I didn't lose everything. Eleanor gestured at the men surrounding her. Everyone's alive. That's all that matters. The bikers spread out to assess the damage. The news was grim. The tornado had cut a path of destruction through Hollister, damaging or destroying hundreds of homes. Power was out across the county. Roads were blocked with debris. But the Hell's Angels were safe, all 79 of them. Jack gathered his brothers near the remains of Eleanor's porch. Listen up. This woman saved our lives. Every single one of us would be dead if she hadn't opened her door. And now she's got nothing, no house, no car, nothing but the clothes on her back. He looked around at the faces of his brothers. We're Hell's Angels. We don't forget our debts, and we owe this woman everything. What are you thinking, Iron? Asked one of the younger riders. Jack turned to Eleanor, who was sitting on a fallen beam, still surveying the destruction with remarkable calm. Ellie, do you have somewhere to stay? Family we can call? My sister's in Springfield. She's been trying to get me to move in with her for years. Eleanor shrugged. I suppose now I don't have much choice. Don't make any decisions yet. Jack crouched beside her, his voice serious. We need to get moving. The roads are going to be chaos, and we've got brothers waiting for us in Branson. But I want you to know something. He took her weathered hand in his. We're coming back, all of us, and we're going to make this right. Eleanor smiled gently. You don't owe me anything, Jack. I just did what anyone would do. No, you did what almost nobody would do, and we don't forget. Over the next hour, the bikers prepared to leave. They cleared debris from the driveway, helped Eleanor salvage what few possessions had survived, and made sure she had food and water to last until help arrived. Before mounting his bike, Jack pulled out his phone and took a picture of Eleanor standing in front of her destroyed home. She looked small and tired, but her eyes were still bright. "I'm posting this to our network," he said. "Every chapter, every brother. They're going to know what you did. You'll make me famous." Eleanor chuckled. "You deserve to be famous." Jack climbed onto his bike. "5 days, Ellie. Give us 5 days, then look out your window." "What window? They're all gone." Jack grinned. "Trust me." The 79 Hells Angels rode away, their engines roaring through the devastated landscape. Eleanor watched until the last bike disappeared from view. Then she sat down on what used to be her front steps and finally allowed herself to cry. She didn't know what Jack had planned. She didn't know that her picture was already spreading across social media, shared by thousands of Hells Angels members nationwide. She didn't know that phone calls were being made, supplies were being gathered, and a small army was being mobilized. All she knew was that she had lost her home, her possessions, and nearly everything that connected her to her past. But she had saved 79 lives, and sometimes that's enough to start a miracle. 5 days felt like 5 years. Eleanor stayed with her sister Patricia in Springfield, sleeping in a guest room that smelled like lavender and felt nothing like home. Patricia meant well, she always did, but her constant fussing only made Eleanor feel more lost. "You should just stay here permanently," Patricia said over breakfast on the 4th morning. "That old farm was falling apart anyway. Thomas has been gone for years. It's time to move on." Eleanor stirred her coffee without answering. Move on. As if 68 years of memories could be packed into boxes and forgotten. Her phone had been buzzing constantly since the tornado. Reporters wanted interviews, news stations wanted statements. Apparently, Jack's photo had gone viral. "Elderly woman shelters 79, Hells Angels from deadly tornado." The headline was everywhere. Eleanor ignored them all. On the morning of the 5th day, Patricia drove her back to Hollister to meet with the insurance adjuster. The drive was sobering. The tornado had carved a path of destruction through 3 counties. Houses reduced to foundations, trees stripped bare, lives shattered in minutes. Eleanor's property looked even worse in daylight than it had at dawn. The farmhouse was completely gone, nothing but a pile of splintered wood and broken memories. Her grandmother's china, Thomas's war medals, Michael's childhood drawings, all of it gone. She was standing in what used to be her kitchen when she heard them. Motorcycles, not 1 or 2, but dozens, hundreds. Eleanor walked to the road and stopped breathing. They stretched as far as she could see, a river of chrome and leather flowing down Route 76, filling both lanes, their engines creating a thunder that shook the ground. Pickup trucks followed, loaded with lumber, tools, building materials. At the front of the procession rode Jack Sullivan, his face split in an enormous grin. He pulled up beside Eleanor and killed his engine. Behind him, bike after bike did the same, until the roar faded to silence. "Told you we'd be back," Jack said. Eleanor couldn't speak. Her hand covered her mouth as tears streamed down her face. Jack dismounted and gestured at the massive crowd behind him. 312 brothers from 27 chapters, plus volunteers from the local community who heard the story and wanted to help. He put his arm around her shoulders. "We're going to rebuild your house, Ellie, better than it was before." I can't afford. You're not paying for anything. This is a gift. From the Hells Angels to the woman who saved 79 of our brothers." Jack squeezed her shoulder. "Besides, we've got donations pouring in from across the country. People want to help. You're famous now, Ellie, whether you like it or not." A massive truck pulled up, and men began unloading equipment, generators, power tools, pallets of lumber and roofing materials, everything needed to build a house from scratch. "We've got contractors, electricians, plumbers, all volunteers," Jack explained, "and we've got something special planned, but that's a surprise." Eleanor watched in stunned silence as the bikers organized themselves with military precision. Teams formed. Tasks were assigned. Within an hour, the debris from her old house was being cleared and the foundation was being inspected. Patricia appeared at Eleanor's side, her mouth hanging open. "Ellie, what is happening?" "I think," Eleanor said slowly, "I'm getting a new house." The next 72 hours were a blur of activity. The Hells Angels worked in shifts, around the clock. When one team got tired, another took over. Local restaurants donated food. Neighbors who had once crossed the street to avoid bikers now brought lemonade and sandwiches. Eleanor tried to help, but the bikers wouldn't let her lift a finger. Instead, they asked her questions. What did she want the kitchen to look like? How many bedrooms? Did she prefer a porch or a deck? "I don't need anything fancy," she kept saying. "Just 4 walls and a roof." But they weren't listening. On the second day, a news crew showed up. Then another. Soon, there were cameras everywhere, documenting the remarkable scene. Hundreds of leather-clad bikers building a home for a 68-year-old grandmother. The interviews were inevitable. "Mrs. Briggs, what made you decide to help the Hells Angels?" Eleanor looked at the reporter like she was speaking nonsense. "They were human beings in danger. What else was I supposed to do?" "But weren't you afraid? These are the Hells Angels." "I was afraid of the tornado, sweetheart, not of people." The clip went viral. Within hours, Eleanor's words were being shared millions of times. "I was afraid of the tornado, not of people," became a rallying cry for kindness, for looking past stereotypes, for seeing the humanity in everyone. But Eleanor didn't care about fame. She cared about the house rising from the ruins of her old life, about the men who worked until their hands bled to give her a home, and about the secret she still hadn't shared with anyone. On the third day, Jack found Eleanor sitting alone behind the barn. She was holding the photograph of Michael, the one she had shown him in the cellar, the only possession that had survived the tornado because she had kept it in her pocket. "Mind if I sit?" Jack asked. Eleanor patted the ground beside her. For a while neither spoke. They watched the construction, listened to the sounds of hammers and saws and men calling to each other. "Can I tell you something?" Eleanor finally said. "Anything. When Michael died, I wanted to die too. He was my only child. Thomas was already gone. I had nothing left." She traced her son's face in the photograph. But then his brothers came, the Hells Angels. They didn't just attend his funeral. They stayed for weeks. They fixed things around the house, brought me groceries, just sat with me when I needed company. "That's what we do for family." "I know, and I never forgot it." Eleanor looked at Jack with tears in her eyes. "When I saw you on that road, struggling against the wind, I didn't just see strangers. I saw my son's brothers. I saw family." Jack was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his vest and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I need to show you something. We found it when we were clearing the debris from your house." He handed her the paper. It was water-damaged but still legible. Eleanor unfolded it and gasped. It was a letter, written in Michael's handwriting. "Mom," it read, "if you're reading this, something happened to me. I wanted you to know that the club will always take care of you. I made them promise, no matter what, no matter when, if you ever need help, they'll be there. You're not just my mother, you're their mother too. I love you forever. Ghost." Eleanor's hands shook so badly she almost dropped the letter. "He wrote this before his last deployment," Jack said quietly. "Gave it to the chapter president with instructions to deliver it if he didn't come home. But the president died in an accident before he could. The letter got lost in storage. We only found it because one of our archivists recognized your name from the news coverage." "He made them promise," Eleanor whispered, "all those years ago. And we keep our promises." Jack put his hand over hers. "When I saw your picture, something felt familiar. I couldn't place it. But now I understand. We were always supposed to find you, Ellie. We were always supposed to be here." Eleanor clutched the letter to her chest and sobbed. For Michael, for Thomas, for all the years of loneliness and struggle, and for the strange, miraculous way that love had finally found its way back to her. That night, Jack called a gathering. All 300 bikers assembled in the field beside Eleanor's property. Torches were lit. The air was thick with emotion. "Brothers," Jack announced, his voice carrying across the crowd. 40 years ago, a young man named Michael Briggs joined our club, road name Ghost. He served with honor. He went to war for his country, and he died a hero. Murmurs of respect rippled through the crowd. Before he left for his last deployment, Ghost made us promise something. He made us promise to take care of his mother, to treat her as our own. Jack paused, his voice rough. We failed to keep that promise. For years, Eleanor Briggs struggled alone, never knowing that her son had tried to protect her even from beyond the grave. He turned to Eleanor, who stood surrounded by bikers, tears streaming down her face. But fate has a way of correcting our mistakes. 5 days ago, this woman saved 79 of our brothers. She didn't know about the promise. She didn't expect anything in return. She just opened her door because that's who she is. Jack walked to Eleanor and took her hands. "Eleanor Briggs, by unanimous vote of every chapter represented here tonight, we're giving you something that's never been given to an outsider before." He reached into his vest and pulled out a small leather patch. It showed the Hells Angels' death head, but with a golden border and the word Mother stitched beneath it. "You're not just Ghost's mother anymore. You're our mother, all of us. From this day forward, you are family, and family takes care of its own." The crowd erupted in cheers. Bikers surged forward to embrace Eleanor, to shake her hand, to welcome her into a family she never knew she had. And somewhere above, Eleanor was certain she could feel Michael smiling. The house was finished on a Sunday morning. Eleanor stood in the driveway, staring at something she never could have imagined. It was beautiful, a craftsman-style home with a wide porch, exactly like she had always dreamed of, but never could afford. Solar panels on the roof. A new barn, stronger than the original, with Briggs family carved into the beam above the door. But the most remarkable feature was on the front of the house. A large wooden plaque, hand-carved by one of the brothers, showing the Hells Angels' death head surrounded by angel wings. Beneath it were the words, "Here lives a true hero, Eleanor Briggs, mother of the Hells Angels." "It's too much," Eleanor whispered. "This is all too much." "It's not enough," Jack replied. "It'll never be enough." The dedication ceremony drew hundreds of people, not just bikers, but neighbors, reporters, politicians, and strangers who had driven from across the country just to meet the woman whose story had touched their hearts. The mayor of Hollister gave a speech. The governor sent a proclamation, but Eleanor didn't care about any of that. What she cared about was the small garden beside the house, where 79 rose bushes had been planted, one for each biker she had sheltered during the storm. What she cared about was the memorial stone near the garden, inscribed with Michael's name, and the words, "A son, a soldier, a brother, forever remembered." What she cared about was the family, her new family, gathered around her, proving that love could find you even when you had given up looking. After the ceremony, when the crowds had dispersed and the sun was setting, Jack found Eleanor sitting on her new porch. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Thomas, Michael?" "All the years I spent alone in that old house, wondering if anyone remembered I existed." She smiled softly. "And now I've got 300 children I didn't even know about." Jack laughed. "We're a handful, I won't lie. I've dealt with worse." Eleanor patted the chair beside her. "Sit with me. Watch the sunset." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned orange, then pink, then purple. "Jack." "Yeah? Thank you. Not just for the house, for finding Michael's letter, for making me part of your family." Her voice trembled. "I spent so many years thinking I had nothing left. And now you've got everything," Jack finished. "And so do we." A motorcycle rumbled up the driveway, then another and another. Within minutes, dozens of bikes were parked on Eleanor's property, their riders gathering on the lawn with coolers and lawn chairs. "What's happening?" Eleanor asked. "Sunday dinner," Jack said simply. "New tradition. Every week, whoever's in the area comes to Mum's house for dinner." "But I didn't cook anything." "We're bringing the food. You just provide the company." Eleanor watched as her yard filled with leather-clad bikers, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. Someone started a grill. Someone else set up a table. Children, she hadn't even known some of them had children, ran across the grass, chasing fireflies. This was her life now. This impossible, beautiful, unexpected life. A year later, Eleanor's story was featured in a national magazine. The article ended with a quote that would be shared millions of times. People ask me if I was scared when those bikers showed up at my door. I tell them the same thing I told the reporters. I was scared of the tornado, not the people. Because here's what I've learned in 69 years of living. The scariest-looking people often have the kindest hearts, and the ones in suits and ties can be the real monsters. Don't judge a book by its cover. Don't judge a biker by his leather. And never, ever underestimate what a little kindness can do. She paused, smiling at the reporter. I opened my door to 79 strangers, and I got 300 sons in return. That's not a bad trade, if you ask me. The reporter asked one final question. Any regrets? Eleanor thought about Thomas, about Michael, about all the years of loneliness and struggle. Then she thought about the porch she was sitting on, the family surrounding her, the love she had found at 68 years old. Just one, she said. I wish I had made more coffee. She laughed, and 300 Hell's Angels laughed with her. Because that's what family does. They laugh together, they cry together. They shelter each other from the storms, and sometimes, against all odds, they find each other exactly when they need to. The end.